So, if you can hear what I'm saying under this mask, let me just take that off. I've just come into work on the bus and on the train. This was very useful. And the other great revelation of the week is the hair's been cut. You've got yours tomorrow?
Mine's tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah, so I will
tomorrow.
definitely not be.
What will happen to your hair when it's cut? Will it just get
Well, I
shorter?
think traditionally it gets shorter.
Yeah?
Yeah, and
Is that the general idea?
that's the general idea.
I just had mine done, actually, on the way in. It was actually just... It felt odd that someone was touching your hair at such close proximity. Do you know what I mean? It's just like...
Oh yeah, I guess you normally get yours done.
Right, okay, so welcome to the Royal Rota. You know what? I'm sure I say this every week, but it's... Why are these Royal Weeks so busy? We just made a little list before we pressed go on the record button, and the list got quite long.
This week it's a very long list.
Yeah.
I think
and then we were chucking things out of the list, thinking actually maybe we shouldn't put that in because there's so much to talk about.
I think I'm going to need a couple of minutes for my rundown, please.
Yeah, you can have your usual minute for Robinson's Royal Rundown, and you can do it very quickly starting now.
Thank you. So I'll start with the newest thing on the list, which is a new development today in the case between the Duchess of Sussex and the Mail on Sunday. A new legal application has been submitted today, which we can talk about in depth. Harry and Meghan also had a conversation around the Queen's Commonwealth Trust this week, which has sparked quite a lot of controversy. The 72nd birthday of the NHS was marked by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge with a visit to a hospital and the Prince of Wales with a message. There were pub visits across the week. The Duke of Cambridge went prior to pubs reopening in England, and the Countess of Wessex, we joined her for a pub visit yesterday. We did an interview this week with the friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, which we can play.
Not uncontroversially, but yes, carry on.
And there was a really, really lovely interview with the Duchess of Cornwall, who guest edited the Emma Barnett show on 5 Live this week.
Radio station. Okay, so...
I rattled through that.
That was a good rattle, actually. And that's why I didn't interrupt you, because I knew it was going to be so long that if I started chipping in, it would be like even longer. So I'm just trying to look at my list and where we start. And given the criticism that we get constantly on social media for still talking about Harry and Meghan, I could poke the hornet's nest and start with Harry and Meghan.
I find that confusing because, I mean, as we said last week, and we've said in many weeks, they remain members of the royal family, and therefore... Yeah,
everyone keeps quoting me, probably saying both on social media, but also in this podcast, that I said they won't be on my brief anymore from the 1st of April. And actually, I suppose I didn't expect them to keep making news to the extent that they would. And a lot of the stuff, for example, you just look at the court case with the Mail on Sunday, relates to a time when Meghan was in the royal family. And as we discussed last week, she was saying she wasn't protected by the royal family when she was pregnant. But I'm not going to start with Harry and Meghan, because I think that will just open me to more criticism on social media. And my Twitter notifications are so long sometimes I can't keep up with them. So,
he never tells me quite where we're going to start.
So I'm going to start somewhere completely different.
No idea
I'm going to start somewhere really, 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 really different.
Go on then.
I'm going to start with the Countess of Wessex. The reason I'm starting with the Countess of Wessex is actually we went to the pub with her. Kinda. We went to the pub with her in Surrey, not far from where she and Edward live. If you're not a royal family aficionado, you might be asking the question, who is Sophie Wessex? Somebody asked me that yesterday, for example.
Really?
One of my friends who's not British, but she said, who's Sophie Wessex? And I said, the Queen's granddaughter, the Queen's daughter-in-law.
She is married to the Earl of Wessex, otherwise known as Prince Edward.
Who is the 4th child and 3rd son.
And they live at Bagshot Park. And we went to a pub very near where they live.
The pub is a British institution where you drink. Anyway, listen, I'm getting distracted. Anyway, so Sophie Wessex, the Countess of Wessex, went to this pub because in the UK, well, in England actually, sorry, not in all parts of the UK, pubs reopened on Saturday. And whilst Prince William went just before they reopened, this was Sophie Wessex going to give their support. So have a listen first, so you can both see her if you're watching on YouTube, or you can hear her if you're listening to this podcast, to some of the things that she said while she was at the pub.
You know what I liked about this morning? You haven't got a mask on.
No, actually, there's so many places I've been to, and especially when you stand with somebody and they say, can I take a picture? And you stand and smile, and of course you're thinking, I'm smiling, but what's the point?
Yes.
Are you making any?
Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
We're zooming and
I bet you never thought you'd do that, did you?
No!
Did you have any of your children on the phone to you going, no, press the bottom left hand? Exactly. You're talking your parents through how to
top
do it.
square.
Yeah,
to get all
which
the
square? It's also when my fathers are trying to get him to say, no, don't stab it, just touch it. You don't need to.
Yes.
So the people that she was speaking to in the Half Moon pub, which I have to say, if you're ever in that part of Surrey in England, just outside London, it's a very fine pub, worth going to, and they do a good lunch. End of commercial. But the reason she was there was she was supporting not only the pub itself, but also talking to some members of the Women's Institute who have been making masks and doing the kind of thing that WI members like to do.
They had a lovely chat, didn't they? We've just played some of it. She was talking about the challenges of wearing a mask and how, she's done a few photos with people.
Like, are you
and
smiling? Can you tell whether I'm
can you
smiling right
tell
now, you see, for example? Am I
whether
smiling
she's
or not?
Smiling. No idea, actually. I should be able to tell with your eyes, but I can't.
Exactly what she was saying.
She said that she wished she'd bought shares in Zoom, don't we?
Yes, she said
all?
she'd become a Zoom aficionado, presumably because she's using it a lot. And she was explaining how she told her dad, stop stabbing the screen, just touch it.
Just touch it, and they were all joking about
It's
how
conversations lots of people have had around the place.
teaching their parents.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was we don't often cover the Countess of Wessex engagement
should
on
we
her
talk
own.
about why we covered this particular engagement? Because actually, I think, is it the only event I've done in the 3 years I've done this job when we've covered Sophie?
That we've covered Sophie on her own.
On her own,
so,
yeah.
Yes, we've often covered
So
her.
are we therefore, because we were, as we always are, invited by Buckingham Palace to come and cover this event, if we were able to, which we were, are we therefore to presume that Buckingham Palace is thinking that Sophie's profile is worth raising now?
I think there is undoubtedly a space that has been left by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex no longer being working members of the family. They have left a gap. And the Countess of Wessex has, for a long time, done a lot of very, very good work with the charities and organisations that she supports.
Which you'll see on, if you follow the royal family Twitter feed, for example, you'll see her pop up, but it's not often reported on in newspapers, on television and in the
And perhaps now, with that space left, there is an opportunity for the press to highlight more of the work that Sophie does.
Yeah.
And I thought actually covering her, she drove herself to the engagement.
She drove herself to the engagement in an electric car,
And
very quietly.
She joked with the women from the WI, if I hadn't have been driving, I'd have joined you for a gin.
Yeah.
But she was very down to earth, made everyone feel very at ease, very natural.
Then again, people say that about a lot of royals, didn't they? They made me feel at ease. It wasn't like I was talking to the Prince of Wales, blah, blah, blah. But what was it about this that I think we both agree was a bit different? I think she is just that much more
down to earth
than any of the others. She used to have a job of her own before she married into the royal family. She was a PR executive, and funnily enough, she actually bumped into someone she used to work for or do the PR for.
And someone else that she knows from the village. They both go to a local gym. Bumped into them. It was sort of, there was a real normality about.
There was a normality, and she said to this woman that she bumped into, "Oh, I don't recognise you not wearing lycra," which I thought, why did he say that? But yeah, it was different, wasn't it? And she was on her own. She wasn't with the kids. But then she talked about the kids as well, didn't she? So her two children are James and Louise. So that's Lady Louise, and James is known as
Viscount Severn.
And they spoke about, Lady Louise, for example, should have been doing her end of school exams this year, her GCSEs, and yet she is having to pause them and wait for the results. Sophie spoke about how they're all going to be on tenterhooks in August when they get the results. It was different, wasn't it? A different kind of royal
It was really
visit.
nice to go and watch her up close and see her on an engagement.
Yeah.
And
there weren't 3 million cameras there snapping away. It was just a different kind of visit, and we got to go to a pub. I mean, and get paid for it. I mean, why would you complain?
In the village
although
where
I didn't
grew
have
up.
any drink, I had a sparkling water, and it was a village where you grew up.
Village where I grew up,
exactly.
which was all very lovely.
All in all, it was an interesting event, and you befriended a puppy.
Oh my goodness, Hendrix. The
Hendrix, named after the famous gin brand.
Puppy. I did rather befriend him.
Yes.
I would have
we
quite liked
it.
to have taken him.
But even Sophie said, she said, if you weren't on a lead, I would have to take you home with me. But
I think I would have fought her for him.
yes. So anyway, so there's one pub. The other pub that William and Kate did was William did on his own pre the lockdown. We had some cider in Norfolk.
Yeah, so William went the
Everyone's
Friday.
doing events very close to their home. We have to travel to them at the moment. Have you noticed? We travel to Sophie Wessex to Surrey, where she lives. We have to travel to William in Norfolk, where he lives.
Can you blame them?
Well, no.
Yeah. So they went to a pub. William went to a pub the Friday before pubs reopened in England, the Rose and Crown in Snettisham. And you'll remember that weeks ago when William first started doing public face-to-face engagements again, he said how much he was looking forward to having a pint in a pub. And he did just that. He had a pint of cider, pint of Aspel's, I think.
Yes.
And a plate of chips. So
now, there's a Harry and Meghan chapter coming up at some point in this podcast. I'm trying to sort of put it off and shove it down the list, so I'm not going to come to it next. What I think I might come to next is yet more developments in the Prince Andrew situation. Actually, not really his situation, but nevertheless, there was the arrest of. As we told you about last week, didn't we, in our podcast, that we managed to do just as it just happened as we came in to record it last week. But more developments in the sense that we, for example, spoke to her, Ghislaine Maxwell's friend, Laura Goldman, who had some very interesting things to say, and we'll play a little bit of that in a minute. We also dug around in our archives, and we're looking into sort of Ghislaine Maxwell's life before she went to America. If you don't know that she's the daughter of a very well-known, or he was at the time, a very well-known media businessman called Robert Maxwell, who died mysteriously on board a yacht in the Canary Islands in Spain. I mean, Prince Andrew is always being kind of dragged into this because of his association with Ghislaine. They were very good friends, as he admits himself. But
they saw each other, he said in that interview he did, the Newsnight interview, they saw each other just last year. I mean, they are very close, and this has heaped yet more pressure on Prince Andrew.
Yes.
But, you know, the interview that we did with her friend, Laura Goldman, she said that, will Ghislaine implicate Prince Andrew? Well, hell would have to freeze over.
Hell would have to freeze over, but then she said maybe hell has frozen over. I mean, so, you know, she doesn't think. She said I think she told me there was a 2% chance that Ghislaine Maxwell would spill the beans or whatever it is on. We should be clear here on what Prince Andrew did or did not know.
Yeah, he denies any wrongdoing. We should
continues
make that
to deny
clear.
all wrongdoing. But have a little listen.
Interesting listening to her, because she spoke about how she'd spoken to Ghislaine 3.5 weeks ago.
She knew where she was, for example.
She'd
hidden away in New
met
Hampshire.
Prince Andrew in 2010 when he'd flown over to see Ghislaine.
And he did have a sweaty palm.
According to her,
according to her, for the very brief meeting she had with Prince Andrew. So we think this is 2010 when Prince Andrew went to end his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein.
But she was talking about just how close Ghislaine and Prince Andrew were, that he would have trusted her with his life, how he would have walked over coals for her. I mean,
and even suggesting they might have had a very intimate, personal relationship.
She could have been the future Duchess of York, she said.
So, I mean, a lot of interesting things that this particular lady said. Remember, this is a friend of Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell has currently been arrested and is facing some very, very serious allegations. But listen to this interview in the context of all that and see what conclusions you come to yourselves. Just on Prince Andrew, did you ever meet him in the times that you were friends with Ghislaine?
Very briefly, not in a passing more than anything.
Tell me about the time that you met him. Where was it and what happened?
It was at Ghislaine's house when he had just come to visit Jeffrey. I guess 2010. First of all, he does sweat no matter what he says, because I remember shaking his hand or whatever you do, and I found it clammy.
And what was he doing? Was he meeting Ghislaine? Was he staying at her house?
Yeah, they were going to some party, and they were very, very, very close. I wonder if her father hadn't died in the way he did, in the manner he did, whether she might have been the Duchess of York.
Do you think they had a relationship that was so close that it was personal, shall I say?
Yeah, I think so. And and they really liked each other, and they really trusted each other.
Do you think that when she comes to be questioned by the FBI, she will talk about what he knew or didn't know.
Will she implicate Prince Andrew? I would say hell would have to freeze over, but she is facing 35 years in jail, so maybe hell has frozen over.
Is it possible to go to any of Jeffrey Epstein's houses, as Prince Andrew admits he's been to a number of them, and not be at least a bit suspicious about what was going on there?
I really think you're giving Prince Andrew too much credit for not being a narcissist and thinking about anybody but himself. I think I don't think he looks at his surroundings, but I don't think that he's that smart to even question. And I think you're misunderstanding how tight he was with Ghislaine, and he would trust her with his life.
So an interesting interview, I think you'll agree. Someone who was very forthright and someone who knew Ghislaine Maxwell very well. But also we had a dig around in our archives, or not us, but someone in another
very clever
department of the building down there somewhere.
Different bit of the building.
Yes.
Yep.
And found some footage of Ghislaine Maxwell speaking in 1991. So the background of all this, as we said, her father had just died on board a yacht. What's the yacht called?
Named after Ghislaine.
Yes, it's called the Lady Ghislaine, and she was speaking on board that yacht to the media after her father had been found dead. We won't play the whole Spanish bit because she speaks very, very fluently in Spanish and with an amazing accent. So again, I can't shed any light on how or where she learned to speak Spanish. And then she goes on to speak in English. So we all just thought it was interesting just to piece together a bit of the picture about who Ghislaine Maxwell is, where she come from. And it was after this moment that she then moved her life effectively to New York, where her friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and others began. So have a watch of this footage from 1991.
En nombre de mi madre, hermanos, y en el mío propio, quiero agradecer la ayuda que nos han prestado las autoridades civiles, militares y judiciales de Tenerife y Las Palmas y los médicos de esta última. Y también quiero agradecer las fuerzas del Cuerpo Guardia Civil. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the many hundreds of people who have sent messages of support to us at this very, very sad time. I want also to thank the press for their courtesy and consideration to my mother and to us at this time, which we appreciate very much. Gracias a todos, and thank you all very much.
There we go. So continuing, we think Ghislaine might be due in court sometime in the next week or so. We'll discuss that if and when it happens, and if and report whatever she does or doesn't say accordingly. Let's stay in America, where there's this couple who live in Los Angeles called
Harry and Meghan.
Again, should we talk about them? Should we not talk about them? I don't know. We did have actually one of the listeners to the podcast, who apparently she goes, Olivia tells us she runs and listens to us at the same time, was asking, let's talk about Harry's Commonwealth comments first. So they did a video, they posted it. He spoke about, in the context of the Black Lives Matter campaign, about whether or not the Commonwealth should look at its past.
So they did this conversation in their roles as president and vice president of the Queen's Commonwealth Trust.
Right, which were two sort of, I don't know whether they're patronage or not, but there were two things that they kept hold of when
and they were
weren't
allowed
bestowed by
to
the Queen.
keep hold of them because the QCT is an independent organisation. The role that he had to relinquish was the Commonwealth Youth Ambassador, which was given to him by the Queen.
Yes, exactly.
So they do maintain a Commonwealth role. And so they were having this conversation with members of the QCT about fairness, justice and equal rights, and this was all around Black Lives Matter. And they made some comments that have been taken very
debate,
controversial
yeah? Okay.
in some quarters.
Right.
Yeah. So shall I read you the particularly controversial comment?
Shall we play it?
Oh, let's play it. Let's hear from
Yeah,
them.
I mean, you could read it if you want, but
I think it's better to hear from them.
Why don't we hear? This is what Harry said in this video that he and Meghan posted for the Queen's Commonwealth Trust.
When you look across the Commonwealth, there's no way that we can move forward unless we acknowledge the past. And I think so many people have done such an amazing, incredible job of acknowledging the past and trying to right those wrongs. But I think we all acknowledge on here that there is so much more still to do. It's not going to be easy, and in some cases it's not going to be comfortable, but it needs to be done because guess what? Everybody benefits. So I think there's a hell of a lot that we together need to acknowledge, but I only see hope and optimism in the fact that we could only do this together.
So, why was that controversial? Discuss. It's like a university lecture.
There's been, the controversy is around whether the Commonwealth looking back on its past.
Right.
So,
but isn't the Commonwealth effectively as old as the Queen is, because the Commonwealth was born out of the ashes of the British Empire and it started to crumble.
And so that's where
Queen's, and this is why a lot of people were criticising Harry, because the Queen's put a lot of effort into building this Commonwealth of voluntary membership to this organisation.
So that's why it's
54
controversial.
countries or
54, because the Maldives just joined. So it's controversial because people think that he is confusing the Commonwealth with the Empire,
Right. And the
the
British
Commonwealth
Empire has a lot to answer for.
Of course,
just as the Spanish did, or the Dutch did, or maybe Nazi Germany, whatever. I mean, there are countries who have pasts for which they need to make some.
But the Commonwealth was created as an entirely voluntary organisation, and it was created to promote things like democracy, peace, fairness, all the things that potentially the Empire didn't do.
So what was this? A misunderstanding of what the Commonwealth is, or does the Commonwealth actually do need to think about its past, 1952 onwards, and think about how it might have acted differently? That's the question, isn't it?
Is that what he was talking about, that countries need to look back, way back past, the beginning of the Commonwealth? He didn't really make it clear, but there has been.
But I mean, should Britain be looking at the part that it played in the slave trade? Bringing people from West Africa to the Caribbean, or whatever it is. I mean, it was quite unclear which bit of Britain's past or the Commonwealth's past he was referring to.
But I think the sticking point is that he describes it as the Commonwealth needs to look back. So is he talking about since it's been created? And as you say, I mean, the Commonwealth is, probably his grandmother's one of her most cherished organisations.
Yeah, and they had to park the heads of government meeting that they would have had in was it in Rwanda, in Kigali, wasn't it meant to be this year? So I mean, there was a lot of criticism for that, but I think Harry and Meghan are trying to use their platform to bring attention to the continuing debate sparked by the whole Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, to have a conversation. Meghan said that we all need to be a little bit uncomfortable right now. This needs to cause a bit of discomfort while people talk about it and push through this. And I think she does have a point that the only way people will move forward is if there's a conversation about it and
to address what happened in the past, and there were many.
I just don't think he maybe phrased it quite how it's come across.
Right. So, I mean, interestingly, that wasn't the only video they did this year. They did this week. They did another video for Centre Barley. I said we won't pay it to you otherwise, but you can find it if you go on our social media pages. Harry and Meghan have also done a video, did a video for Centre Barley, the charity which helps those living with HIV and AIDS in Southern Africa. A fantastic charity. We've been and seen its work in Africa. So you can find that on our social media pages as well. So a lot of video action from Los Angeles, from Team Sussex this week, and some
I think
legal action.
Their comments around the Commonwealth, though, do show how anything Harry and Meghan say, there is interest in. So they do have this real platform to make a difference and change. And I think they're just, there's just going to be a while where they work out how they use those voices and bring attention to the causes that they care so deeply about, without perhaps causing quite so much controversy.
Yeah, I think, like a lot of people, Harry and Meghan have been sort of their plan, or whatever plan they had for Archewell, their sort of foundation or non-profit charitable organisation, whatever you call it. that's all been knocked off course by coronavirus, and so they're focusing a lot on the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment, and yet we're still talking about the past because Meghan and Harry are still, or Meghan, sorry, is still pushing ahead with her legal action against the Mail on Sunday, and we had another development in that this week.
We did. So we've talked quite a bit about this, and the latest development is that Meghan has put in a application to the High Court to prevent the naming of those 5 friends who anonymously spoke to People magazine to what she says defend her from the British tabloid media.
Yes.
She says, and she claims that Associated Newspapers, who the case is against, are threatening to publish those
the names
names
of 5 of her friends. So a bit of history on this is that Meghan is suing the Mail on Sunday for breach of privacy and copyright and data protection because they published a letter that she sent to her father. Part of the Mail on Sunday's defence is that, well, hold on a minute, you had 5 friends, one of whom spoke anonymously in People magazine about the existence of the letter, so therefore we are justified in publishing it. That's a rough summary of where we are with that case. And the Team Sussex is saying that Mail on Sunday are threatening to put those names, those 5 names, which do exist in the court papers. I don't have them here, but in the confidential part of the court papers, those 5 names exist. But they're in the confidential.
They're just
part.
A, B, C, D, and E.
Yes, A, B, C, D, and E. And so the Mail's now the Mail's issued a statement as well. We'll come to that in a minute. But Meghan wrote a sort of a witness statement. It was called, wasn't it, about how if you were to publish their names, you'd be damaging their mental health. She called the Mail on Sunday's threat, quotes, vicious.
She did.
Mean, it was,
and she said that those 5 friends aren't the ones on trial, and neither is she.
It's the newspaper that's on trial because she claims that it breached her privacy in publishing the letter. The Mail, in its turn, has said, look, we didn't intend to publish, we didn't say we were going to publish, but we think that those names should be out in the public domain because they are a sort of central part to the whole case.
Yeah.
And then actually, I've been speaking to Team Sussex, and they've hit back and said, well, hold on a minute, we think the Mail were going to publish, and they came to us and said as much on Monday and wanted a response from us. So it's a lot of tit for tat in this one. We haven't even got to court yet, can I just point out? So.
I know, and again, we said last week how publicly this is all playing out, and every time one of them, replies, we get to see more of Meghan's life, and I think this is going to be quite.
Because actually it was only because of the court case that last week, she made those claims about being unprotected, that her friends were worried about her mental health during her pregnancy because of what she called the tabloid attacks on her. We've now got her talking about her friends and how vulnerable they are. I mean, it is kind of, would she have expected this when she launched the legal action? Maybe, I don't know. But a lot of people are saying that is the trouble with taking court action, is that everything has to come out of the cupboard.
I mean, she seems very determined to follow through with this. I mean, there's absolutely no let up. She seems willing to put this all in the public domain. So
why don't we hear from the Duchess of Cornwall?
Oh, this was lovely, wasn't it? This was a really, really lovely. She was being interviewed.
Yes.
5 Live as part of guest editing the show.
Guest edited the show, and actually, so therefore, this is a radio station in the UK run by the BBC that Camilla guest edited a certain programme on it, and made the programme focus on all the things that Camilla's been talking about during lockdown, which is the terrible situation that many women face with domestic abuse during the lockdown. It was focusing on many of her charities, which are essentially focused on women and literacy and all the things that Camilla cares about.
Yeah, and we also got to hear a bit more about her ballet.
Her ballet.
A silver swan.
And then actually we laugh about that, but actually the serious point of it is actually keeping older women active actually this is all part of the osteoporosis. And anyway, have a listen to what Camilla had to say on the radio, because we thought it was again you got a bit of an insight into a member of the royal family you don't normally get.
Got to zone in and do it, but I did hear the odd sort of crash to my left and right.
And you've kept doing it. I mean, this is the thing. It's important.
Yes, lockdown. I got it on Facebook, so I got Sarah on Facebook. But then I managed to, obviously doing something wrong, did something to my back, so I had to lay off it for a bit. But I can't wait to get back to it again. You feel so well afterwards.
I've got to ask this, because you've obviously been locking down with your husband. Did you get him to have a plie or two? Did you get him to try?
I did not get him doing a plie, but he is a very, very fit man.
So he's not doing ballet with you?
He is not doing ballet.
Okay.
I think that
what's
wouldn't be a good idea.
No?
I don't think we're going to do a pas de deux yet.
So no chance of any ballet for Prince Charles, which I think might come as a relief to many people.
Particularly Prince Charles, I'm sure.
But actually, I think you listened to more of this radio programme than I did, but you said that there was a lot of humour and warmth that came across from Camilla, which, again, people don't often get to see or hear.
The interview was about 30 minutes, and I thought it was just really revealing about Camilla as a person, the things that she cares about, her warmth, her humour. She was talking about her grandchildren and how difficult that had been during lockdown, not being able to.
She can't wait to hug them, because actually she told us when we saw them in Gloucester recently that she'd seen the kids but she couldn't hug them, but now she's
been able to see them, but she said, you still can't hug them, and everyone across the world can sympathise with that. Everyone's going through that, but I just thought it was a kind of great display of the things that really matter to Camilla and a bit of insight into her as a person. She was even talking about the dogs, and we know that they're allowed to go pretty much everywhere. But I think they rule the roost. Beth and Bluebell, rescued from Battersea Dogs Home. She talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So,
Now, whilst her husband won't be squeezing himself into a ballet tiara, what do you call it? Tutu. That's the thing. Tiara is the thing you wear on your head, yeah? And he won't be squeezing himself into a pair of ballet tights. But he has been giving praise for the NHS, for the National Health Service, which has hit its 72nd birthday. And what a 72nd birthday that's had. Not in a good way, really. It's been challenged at more time, at even greater than it has at any time in its history.
Any time, yeah. Charles said when he gave a very heartfelt message for the 72nd birthday, which was on Sunday. And he said that it was months before he was born that Trafford General Hospital opened its doors. So the NHS is as old as Prince Charles.
On July the 5th, 1948, just 4 months before I was born, Trafford General Hospital opened its doors, providing care to all according to their need, not their ability to pay. After more than 7 decades, that founding principle, though now familiar, is still a profoundly moving statement of our values, and it has never been more relevant than it is now. The current pandemic means that the NHS and the entire country has been through the most testing time in the service's history. Our remarkably selfless nurses, doctors, paramedics, and countless other staff have made costly sacrifices to provide treatment for more than 100,000 patients with coronavirus and thousands more who needed other care. And in tribute to them, we have come together as a nation to thank them for their skill, professionalism, and dedication. During these past months, the phrase "to shield" has taken on an emphasis it did not have before. But while the meaning may be new, the principle of protection for those in need is timeless. In Psalm 18, we read these words of thanks for deliverance from danger. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand has held me up, and your gentleness has made me great. To all who have given so much during this present danger, I just want to say that it is you who have been our shield. It is your hands that have held us up. It is your gentleness that has made us great. Despite all that has been endured, there is deep cause for gratitude and a true reason for pride. In the way we care for all members of our society, our greatness truly is in gentleness. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for what you have done. More than I can possibly say.
And not just Prince Charles, who was praising the NHS, but William and Kate did as well. They went actually to a hospital visit, and what was the hospital called? Granny's Hospital, wasn't it?
The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in King's Lynn,
Elizabeth Hospital.
which is not far from where they're living at Anne
To
Hall.
be fair, William and Kate haven't done very much, very far from. We know because I know because I went up to Norfolk for when Kate went to that garden centre visit. It's not a short trip, not from anywhere. So I'd encourage William and Kate to come closer to us next time.
But they are still highlighting very important causes, and the hospital they went to has provided care for 450 COVID patients across the pandemic. And while they were there celebrating their 72nd birthday with a tea party, they met, do you remember the nurse Susie Vaughan, who'd spent 2 months away from her children, and there was the video of her creeping up behind them.
Yes.
And I think they were watching something, and she was reunited with them. I think it went viral at the time.
Now, of course, this is a time when a lot of people are worried about their jobs. Were Prince Charles and Camilla needing a new job should their one suddenly become redundant? I thought this picture was quite good. If you can see this picture, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening to this podcast, just go onto my Twitter at ITV, and there's a picture of Charles and Camilla standing in front of a Asda delivery van on a visit to Bristol. So if things don't work out in the royal family, there's always Asda deliveries for them.
Yeah, they've been visiting. Their visits are all very targeted, aren't they? They're visiting all the people, key workers that have been central to getting this country
NHS,
through.
Key workers.
Yeah,
exactly.
So the whole family has been very careful to pay tribute to those people and go out and see them.
And as ever, do we know what's going on next week?
We do, but I am afraid I can't talk about it.
I'm just thinking I don't, actually. So do you know something that I don't?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So there's something we can tell you about next week that even I don't know about at the moment. So so we can't do our usual Robinsons. We never got a proper name for it, did we? The Robinsons Royal Look Ahead thing.
No, I think we're probably going to have to
we might
can that for the time being.
It's not
There's also a lot of talk about, the Queen and when she will
go to Balmoral.
Will she go to Balmoral?
Our understanding is, by the way, that she will go to Balmoral for the summer, which is where she spends every summer up in the Scottish Highlands. When she goes is a matter of much debate.
I think though, even though the plan is for her to go, they would review it, and keep it under constant review, given the current situation is quite fluid.
She can be, having been to Balmoral, and I'd thoroughly recommend going if you can, then it's a perfectly good place to be isolated, isn't it?
Super
no risk
remote,
of anyone bumping into her.
And
actually, on that note, on things reopening, the Royal Collection Trust has announced that the staterooms at Buckingham Palace will be open on the 23rd of July, plus Windsor Castle will reopen on the 23rd of July, plus the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh will reopen on the 23rd of July.
Things slowly coming back to normal.
So you want to go and visit a palace, you can. If you haven't got time to visit a palace, this podcast comes out every week, and we can, we can tell you what it's like inside. Not quite as much fun, but hey. Thank you for continuing to tune in, to let us know. Just put the hashtag ITV Royal Rota on... Royal Rota ITV?
That's the one.
Put the hashtag Royal Rota ITV on any of your social media posts, and then we'll get to see it. If you've got questions you want us to answer, we will do our best to answer them, just like the lovely Olivia did today. And we will keep doing this podcast until such a time that the royal family break for the summer, which we're presuming they still will, despite the lockdown and everything else. So we'll be here every week on a Friday. See you next week.